Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You're listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Timbucci. That's me. Today's episode is a guest episode, and today's guest is Sarah Tuneberg. Sarah is the co-founder and CEO of a company called Geospiza. Geospiza is a company that works with companies and corporations and cities to get better and smarter and stronger, more resilient around climate change. So they have an entire platform that helps cities get better data and better data visualization about how they could prevent some of the natural disasters that hit those cities. And so the reason I wanted to have Sarah on the show is because as an early stage company founder, she and her co-founder have had to be very resourceful when it comes to lead generation. And that led us to our conversation today, specifically looking at how Sarah and her team are using LinkedIn every day to generate conversations. All of this began through her sales mentor in a Techstars program, where her mentor said, look, you got to get 40 net new conversations every month. And so she said, okay. And off they went. And so they started experimenting with LinkedIn, and she's come up with a really nice structure that's allowed her to do some very appropriate and targeted outreach to her target customer that's generated a remarkable response rate that's led to conversations, obviously demos and opportunities, and then eventually down the sales funnel to new customers. And so in talking with Sarah, I thought it would be a very, very effective way of having somebody who's in your seat, just like a lot of the listeners of the show. She's a CEO, running sales, growing a company of an early stage enterprise company. And it's really, really hard to figure out, like, how am I going to generate new leads? How am I going to fill the top of the funnel? And having somebody who's doing this every single day in the seat that you're sitting in every single day, I thought would be a really fun and insightful way of sharing with you some best practices and very tactical practices on how you could be using LinkedIn every single day to help you generate leads at the top of your sales funnel. And so conversation centered around how she and her team are using LinkedIn in terms of their outreach and their messaging and the structure. The other thing that I think is really important in the conversation, about halfway through, maybe a third of the way through, we took a little bit of a right turn in the conversation, and we talked about her experience as a female founder and some of the challenges that she's experienced and some of the insights that she's gained that we put together in our conversation, and I think delivers to you a couple of very specific tips that you as a company founder, whether you're male or female, can use to be more resourceful, more effective, and a lot more supportive of some of your team members that are out there, especially female team members that are out there on the sales front or out there on the customer success front, making sure that we're positioning them and putting them in a situation where they can succeed, where they might be feeling a certain amount of resistance from their male counterparts on the other side of the table. And so I think it's an important conversation that we all need to continue to have. I think we would all agree that we've made a lot of great strides, and I think we'd all agree that there's a lot more strides that we need to be making around this social change that's right here in front of us every single day. And so I'm really thankful that we had Sarah on the program, first to talk about LinkedIn, but then to have this conversation kind of spring up through the course of our interview. I think you're going to find it very useful, and a very good resource with some tactical tips that you can take back and put to action right away at your startup. So those are kind of the two main topics that we talked about. I will tell you right now, before we get into the episode, when we first got onto our Zoom chat and recorded this episode, one of the things I like to do is just hit play. As soon as somebody gets on, we hit record and we just off we go. So oddly, we had a little bit of a conversation about my cat. I have a cat. I have two cats named Ziva and EG. And well, you're going to learn a little bit more about EG in just a minute. But the first couple of minutes of our conversation, I got talking about my cat. She got talking about her pet bird. I think it was just kind of a fun thing. One of the things that happens organically when you meet up with somebody and you start having a conversation. So I decided, you know what, I'm just going to leave that into the episode. I'm not going to edit it out. So if you want to skip the first couple of minutes and you don't want to hear about my cat, no big deal. But if you do, hang in there, and the next first couple of minutes of the conversation, you get to hear about EG, my cat, one of my two cats. So that's it for now. Let's head over to my conversation with Sarah Tuneberg. You know what? We're going to go cat in the office for this conversation.
All right.
What do you think?
Trusting the cat. I like it. I'm in.
Trusting the cat. I don't know if we can trust this cat. He's a loud one. His name is EG. Double EG, double E.
EG. Okay.
EG. Lots of vowels, lots of E's. Not very good if you're playing Wheel of Fortune. You know, if you're trying
to win a Wheel of Fortune, never a good thing.
I'll take an E. I'll take an E, Pat. I'd like to buy a vowel.
Then now you win.
Now you win. Yeah.
Or you just have to guess what the middle letter was, which feels like it's not necessarily highly informed, right? You'd be like, EJ.
Yeah, not intuitive.
No.
Well, he's gray. When we got him from the SPCA, they called him EG for EG, meaning Earl Grey.
Oh.
And so we just adopted it as EG, but we spelled it WEG.
I like it. I've been spending too much time probably on the local like SPCA and Dumb Friends League pages in Denver, and it's really fun to see sort of the naming nomenclature, like what the cat people are very different than the dog people, clearly, and it's really funny.
Yeah, well, the people listening are probably like, what the hell are they going to talk about sales? Yeah, because we just go on record and this is the way we roll here.
I like it.
We have cats. I don't consider myself a cat person. I don't consider myself a dog person either. I didn't really think I would have pets, but now we have pets. I'm like, okay, this is cool. I like pets. I've had him for like 9-10 years, and he's really grown on me.
I like it. So, I am weirdly a bird person.
Oh, that's awesome. Birds live a long time.
Some of them. Not all of them.
Some of them.
Some
Not
of
all
them.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have a friend who has a bird named Pickles that is like 20 years old now.
Oh, like the parrot. Yeah. We have a very small parrot and also chicken, which are not exactly a pet, but.
We thought about getting chickens, actually. We're allowed to have 3 chickens. If you live in Davis, you're allowed to have 3 chickens in your backyard.
3? Doesn't seem like
up to 3.
Up to 3. We are allowed in Denver to have up to 8.
Up to 8.
We have 7. Pushing up to the limit.
Pushing the limit here. Well, that was awesome. It's good to have you on the show here, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we dive right in?
Sounds great.
Instead of tiptoeing around, before we go through the rest of the kingdom and phylum, give everybody an entire biology class. So as I mentioned in our call last week, one of the things that I always do is I do the introduction to the episode after we've spoken. So by the time people have gotten to this part of the conversation, they already know a little bit about you. One of the things I always want to hear is directly from our guest when people say, hey, Sarah, what do you do? And what does your company do? How do you describe that for folks?
Yeah. So I am the co-founder and CEO of an early stage tech startup that is working on bringing together huge amounts of data to better visualize and take action on climate risk. So we work primarily with very large enterprises, especially big global 2000 companies, to help them really use the wealth of risk data to reduce their risk and take meaningful action. And that looks like significant business process change and investment identification and things like that. It's not just feel good, but real strategic change.
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that you've worked on personally for quite some time. Like, how did you identify this problem aside from the massive social change? And for people listening, by the way, we're not going to spend a bunch of time talking about climate change. I think not why we're on this. We're going to talk about the sales side of what Sarah does. I do think it's important to for people listening to get a sense for how did you get to where you are today? Like, why this problem? How did you become so ensconced in solving the climate change issue?
Absolutely. So I am that sort of classic domain startup founder. I'm an emergency manager by training and practice. I'm a social worker and I have a background in public health. And I worked for all of my career up until co-founding Geospiza, my company, as an emergency manager, helping communities, states, federal governments, big organizations prepare for, respond to, and recover from mostly natural disasters. And that was my sort of mission in life, was to really work on those problems. And it was an incredible experience, still continues to be. I've responded to more than 50 presidentially declared disasters in the United States. And there was this really common theme across a lot of my experience, especially towards the end before I transitioned and founded a company, which was friends of mine in the private sector had these really incredible business intelligence tools. I had a friend who worked in ad tech, and she once showed me just this crazy wealth of data she had on her customers. And I was making really important life or death decisions and had a pile of spreadsheets and 74 tabs on my browser and a calculator. maybe a little more than a calculator, but like was like that. And I was like, this is crazy. Somebody's got to do something. And I kept sort of waiting, and finally I did it. And that ties into climate change as sort of a transition, because as we see weird and wonky weather and disruptions to the natural hazard environment from climate change, the world sort of melded together. And so the sort of ever-present daily thing of climate really looks like wild weather for people and companies. And those weather things disrupt their supply chains and their whole value chain. So we're engaged in making those changes with them.
So I'm curious, from a origin story, what was the seminal moment that got you to go from somebody ought to do something to I'm going to do something? Was there a specific event or what? Well, I'm curious about that decision before we get into the sales conversation. How did you go from working in the problem to working on the problem, so to speak?
Yeah, so I wish there was a single moment. There are a couple that stand out, and then there was, I think, sort of a cascading chain of really powerful events that happened. So the first one was I was working on Hurricane Sandy, and it just was, it's ridiculous to say, such a disaster. And it really just clarified for me that there had to be a better way, that this huge city, the seat of the financial world in the United States, and a city with so many resources, and a city that had Bloomberg, who was all about data, and we still had this terrible event and really horrible outcomes, like people being stranded in public housing because their elevators lost power and they couldn't get down. I was like, this is crazy. So that was sort of the, like, to me, that feels like the heartstring of the founding. And then on a totally different level, my partner, totally in passing on a road trip with no meaning, we were talking about sort of life and what we were going to do. And he was like, well, you can't be a consultant forever. And I was like, oh, huh. And I noodled on that for a long time and was like, am I going to work in this space forever, or is there something else? And so that led to exploring sort of this idea, like, oh, maybe I can be a founder. Maybe I can do something. And yeah, the hilarity of not being a domain, of not knowing anything about business, not knowing anything about tech, and trying to start a tech company ensued, which is a conversation for another podcast.
It probably is. And it's also, I think, really important background and baseline for the topic that you and I talked about last week, which, to switch gears, is probably a little bit of a left curve, or left, I don't know, I'm mixing metaphors here. People get picking up what I'm putting down here. Like, when we started talking, the topic we want to talk about was how to use LinkedIn for lead generation.
Yeah.
So, like, there's this, like, okay, how do we go from, Sarah, who's never done sales, was a consultant, decided to start a tech company. You've done a TEDx talk, which I watched. It was pretty recent, right? The TEDxMileHigh.
Yes.
And so you've done, like, you've got this domain expertise, and here you are, early stage company, and every day you got to, like, we got to get some leads here. We got to get some conversations going. So you've got this authority voice expertise in your world to some degree. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden, because 1,000 people watch a TED talk, that all of a sudden you've got all these leads flowing into your website.
No.
So, you've gotten very tactical, and frankly, the performance of how you've been able to generate leads in LinkedIn, remarkable in a lot of ways, that we talked about. So I wanted to kind of talk through that, and maybe as a point for this portion of the conversation, why LinkedIn? Like, why did you choose LinkedIn and I know you have other lead sources, but I know this is a place where you do spend a lot of time and effort. Why LinkedIn versus, the other 27 places where you could be generating leads?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. And I think for us, and for me, I really try to, I don't know if I try or it's just part of who I am, have a data-driven life. I'm really interested in the data that underlies things, and I'm really excited about experimentation. And experimentation was the origin of our success on our company and in LinkedIn sales. And so we started, we had a great sales mentor, we still do, we did Techstars Boulder, and he grilled and ground into us the importance of filling the top of the funnel. We, in the first sort of 6 months of our company, had really ended up with what he called, and maybe this is universal, but Goldilocks sales, where we had this perfect person or this perfect company, but everything sort of had to be right. And it was like a lot. It always felt like I couldn't always get my arms around how I was going to push this across the line. And he was like, no, you're doing it all wrong. You got to focus higher up in the funnel because you need more. You can't put your hopes on these like perfect people because something might happen. And we had that something that might happen, which is they are now a customer of ours, but one of our customers delayed a year in closing a deal with us because her husband died and she just couldn't. She took the time off and there was nobody else there. And she was our champion, and it was a really powerful experience. But so back to the idea of experimentation. He instilled in us this idea that we had to have at least 40 net new conversations a month. And so then we experimented with what way was going to work. And for us, that looked like LinkedIn and using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. And it gave us a combination of great things. One, it is very low cost. It's not like lots of lead gen strategies, which require either a lot of purchasing a list or a lot of capital intensive stuff. And we just were able to do it. And then we did a lot of experimentation. Once we found that LinkedIn was starting to work, we did a lot of message experimentation and landed on one that seemed to have legs. And it's been great. And it's a very short little 3-sentence combination of a little external credibility, a piquing of interest about what we're building, and a request to learn more about that person who we're reaching out to, and also to share with them what we're doing. And I think another thing that's really important about this strategy is that it's credible because we're directed in who we give it to. There's not a sort of scattershot approach. We've also been very careful and done a lot of research and exploration and landing on who our right customer is. And so I think it's a combination of those things, of experimentation leading to really precise outcome.
No, that's really good background. So I want to dig into a couple of these things. So I wrote down the word 40. I wrote down structure in terms of credibility, peak, and request. And then I wrote down directed. So maybe we just kind of take each of those three in more detail. So this mentor from Techstars, it said 40 net new. Was there any particular magic to that? Or did you just say, like the mentor said 40 and you're like, okay, 40 is the number?
Yeah, 40 was the number. I asked him once, I said, is there any magic about 40? And he said, no, I just made it up in the meeting because it seemed like something you guys could deliver on and it'd be a little bit of a stretch goal. And I think sometimes when you're looking for guidance or you're in a place of trying out something new and hard, having just a metric to deliver on can feel really good. And so we were like, 40? Sure, we can do 40. 40 sounds great. Let's start with 40. And so we started with 40. And obviously, that then allowed other experimentation about how many we actually had to push through the funnel to get a deal to close. And it varies on 40 is sort of our benchmark still. It ends up being a good number for us, but it's not going to be for everybody in every product. But why not start with 40? It's 5 a week. Go for it. For our team, it's 5 a week. So
yeah, no, I mean, 5 a week. So how do you get to 40 because of the team size? So everybody on the team is responsible for generating. Okay, exactly. So you have 5 net new, two of you doing this, which is in itself, I think, important. So it's not just you doing the selling. Well, a lot of it's coming to you. You have a co-founder that's helping you with those.
Correct. And another fun thing about the 40 net new, which is something you don't realize until you're in it. 40 net new then generates X, depending on what your metrics are, 10 demos, and then 10 demos equal 5 sales conversations, and then 2 closes, hopefully, right? That's sort of what you want to get to, whatever your line is. And those calls compound on each other. And so it's an exponentially, maybe not exponentially, but it's a growing scheduling challenge. And if you do it right, it's good. But you got to fill that top of the funnel to get those deals across the line. It was a good lesson.
Yeah, and there's
lesson.
There's a lot of lessons here. I mean, number one is putting a number to it, whether it's the right number or not. I think too often they're like, oh, I got to do my product. I got to get leads. Okay, well, how many? Let's put a number to it,
right?
And let's put our heads down and let's, whether it's experimentation or not, let's just see how close to 40 we can get. Maybe we get 12, and we have to look at the amount of effort that it took to get those 12. and say, okay, the effort isn't worth it on this platform, or maybe the way we're going about it is wrong. And so it allows you to make adjustments quickly. But if you don't have that target or a benchmark, however hypothetical it is, then you don't have a way of adjusting up or down.
Exactly.
And so like we had a coaching call this morning with one of our clients who was hiring a new salesperson in a new market halfway across the world. And she even said, look, I'm hiring this person sort of experimentally. We think there's a market there, but we're not going to know until we have an outside salesperson in Singapore. So we're going to make this investment and we're going to set sales goals, but we really don't know if that person's going to be able to generate sales. And so her question to me is, well, what do I manage towards? Because this person could be in Singapore for 6 months and not get a deal, and it's not their fault. And so we peeled it back and said, well, instead of measuring outcomes, let's measure activities. Like, what do you feel like is a reasonable amount of daily, weekly activities? And we said, well, we came up with like a 10-3-1. So 10 outbounds, 3 conversations, 1 actual like meeting. If you get a salesperson doing that every day on average for 3 months, you're probably going to know pretty quickly whether or not there's a market there or not. And maybe you find out that the person can do 7-2-1 some days and 7-2-0 the next day, or maybe they find out like, I actually can do 15 and 5 and 2. And it just gives you a way to calibrate. But at least it's a starting point when you're coming up with when you're starting with nothing. You're trying to construct the funnel. You don't have history to go after and say, yeah, we're going to do 40 outreaches, which leads to this, which leads to this, which leads to new deals. You're bootstrapping that model in a lot of ways, speaking of data, based on activity.
Yeah. And I think especially for people who don't have a lot of experience in sales, or who are first-time founders, maybe technical founders who don't have a lot of the customer engagement background, setting a metric and striving toward it can really be the external motivator that you need to know if you're going to win in this, if you've got the right thing. It also, another thing that's been really powerful for us is that we think of the opportunity as also developing business friends, that sometimes people aren't the right fit for us now, but they may be the people who will connect us to the next people. And I think for technical co-founders who lots of times, or technical founders who don't do a lot of networking, who might not engage with their customers, or who are selling to enterprise and they're software developers, that chasm is big. And so engaging in those conversations is like a muscle, and you sort of work it out and it gets stronger, and you never know when it's going to really benefit you. And so keeping an open mind and just getting those contacts is really, really powerful.
Yeah. And I think also if you're not a salesperson, even if you are a salesperson, it's intimidating. You're like, I got to pick the phone. It's just human, right? Nobody likes to be rejected. And so if instead you just say, look, I got to do my 20, just like I got to do 20 push-ups at the gym. I'll do my 20, even if all 20 suck, at least I did my 20. Then it helps to remove that sort of personal rejection, because then you're like, okay, well, at least I got that one done. And you just sort of move on. And it does get you, by law of large numbers, you're going to engage in conversations, and just everyone is practiced for the next one. And so whether it's LinkedIn contacts or cold calls, or I do this at conferences, I used to teach my team, segment the day. Like, you got your morning segment from breakfast to lunch, then you have lunch to dinner, and then the evening activity. So like 3 segments of the day. Set a 10-person goal, 10 conversation goal in each of those 3 segments. Instead of saying I'm going to talk to as many people as I can at the conference, like if it's 11:30 and I've only talked to 8, okay, I got 30 minutes to do 2 more. Who can I go find and talk to? And it sort of gamifies it, but it removes this sort of like who do I talk to? I'm kind of scared. It removes the rejection, and it's just an arbitrary number. It's 10. It's like, okay, maybe I hit 12, maybe I hit 8, but at least it's something to go for, and it's a small enough segment of time. You're like, in the next 4 hours, I got to talk to 10 more people. It's pretty easy to do. And if 30 people at the end of the day, a 2-day conference, I had 60 conversations. Now all of a sudden it was worth that plane ticket and hotel.
Absolutely. And setting those goals well in advance feels to me like the most powerful strategy, and to understand in advance what you're going to get out of any experiment, whether it's a conference or subscription to a LeadGen or investment of time in Sales Navigator. Understanding what success looks like and what that metric is so important.
Yeah. Cool. All right, folks, we are off and running in my conversation with Sarah Tuneberg. Listen, I am so excited that you're here listening to the Startup Selling Show. One of the main focus areas for me and for our company every single day is we look at our company mission, which is to help 100 startups reach $10 million in annual recurring revenue in the next 10 years. So it's 100 startups to hit $10 million in annual recurring revenue in the next 10 years. If you do the math on that, that comes to $1 billion. We want to make $1 billion impact in the startup selling world. And one of the ways we do that is, of course, is with this podcast. Another way we do it is with our workshops. Another way we do it is with our coaching program. And yet another way that I've learned how we can be more effective and reach more people is through a book that I recently published, a book that we published this year. The book is called Stop Hustling, Start Scaling. Stop Hustling, Start Scaling. And as much as it would be great if you want to go over to Amazon and buy a copy, listen, I didn't write the book to get a bunch of royalties. You don't make much on royalties, and at the end of the day, an island on Fiji is way too expensive to buy just on book royalties. So instead of worrying about getting people to buy a copy, I just want to give away a copy of this book to as many people as possible. And so the way to get a copy of the book is to head over to my company website, salesqualia, QUALIA.com. Go over to salesqualia.com, and right there on the homepage, when you get to the homepage, you'll see a link right in the middle of the page that says start reading now. So if you click that button, what that's going to do is give you the opportunity to just go ahead and throw in your email address so we know where to send you a complete, full, 100% of the book PDF version of Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, so you can get to work reading that book right now. It's a book that I wrote that teaches you how to use what I call the Q framework. There's 7 questions that you can use in this Q framework that will help you identify exactly where you are with every sales opportunity, and you can use this framework to build a repeatable sales process. So I want to make sure as many people out there that are appropriate for this book get a copy of it. So like I said, I don't care if I sell a copy or give away a copy. If you don't have a copy, go over to salesqualia.com right now, click start reading now, pop in your email address, and then we'll email a copy of that book to you. So look, that's it. That's the end of the commercial. As I like to say, let's head back over to my conversation with Sarah. So I want to talk about the second piece there, where like the actual structure. So let's dig into the LinkedIn piece. And you mentioned this 3-line structure they use in terms of credibility, pique the interest, and then request to learn more. I guess 2 questions there. How did you arrive at that structure? I'm sure it wasn't like the very first message. You're like, oh, well, this is the 3. No. You're like shaking your head like, oh my God.
No.
So how did you get there? And what exactly does that entail, those 3 pieces? Maybe define it first, and then we can talk about how you got there.
Sure.
When you say credibility, pique interest, request to learn more, what exactly does that?
Yeah. So we have the luxury of, and also the challenge that we are a small team still. And so this message comes directly from me. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of an early stage tech startup, sort of clarifying who we are, also person to person, really important. Like, whoa, the CEO of a tech startup is reaching out to me. Don't underestimate the power of being the founder and being the person who's interested. You can really respond to that. So use it while you've got it. Hopefully you will scale beyond needing it, and that'll be powerful. But while you've got it, use your co-founder or your founder or your executive credibility. You've worked really hard to get here, so we use it, and we should. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of a tech startup that's working to help enterprises take action on their climate risk. Another piece we talk about, I think it actually comes before that, is that we've been funded by the National Science Foundation to develop this product. So external validation there. We are taking, which is all true, but somebody who is outside of our world, who has power and money, has said this is a good idea. So really important, a lot packed into, we're funded by the National Science Foundation. And you don't have to have NSF money to do this. You could talk about one of your investors or a key customer or something about your background. We all have something really important, and an external validator. Put that in your message because people really resonate. And then I'd love, given your role at X company, I'd love to share with you what we're doing and get your thoughts. So then recognizing them as a person and their role in their company, which I think we find that our key customers are really proud of the work they're doing and really invested in it. That might not be things for everybody, but in our case, recognizing that they're a person in this great entity, great organization helps. And then asking for an easy thing, which is I'd love to share. And people respond beautifully. We get amazing rates of acceptance and then move to meetings from LinkedIn. And then my favorite stat is of the meetings that schedule from LinkedIn or direct contact, 96% of them show and have a net new meeting with us, which is crazy. Yeah. So we are able to use through experimentation. We've found the right message and we found the right people and we get to talk to them and we're super excited about it. So backing up to your other question, which was how, yeah, go ahead.
I want to ask a clarifying question on precisely what channel within LinkedIn are you using to send this message? Because you mentioned Sales Navigator, which is, for lack of a better term, an add-on to LinkedIn as a platform. And then in either case, you can send a connection request to somebody, you can send an email to somebody. In some cases, you can send a direct message based on how they set up their profile if they belong to the same group. So are you sending these as connection requests? This message inserted into a connection request, or are you connecting first and then following this message? What is the
inserting the message into the connection request?
Okay, cool.
The note, so when it says more people are likely to, lots of people see the message, more people are likely to connect with you if you include a message, we put it there.
Mm-hmm. Sure. One thing I noticed is that you didn't say, when can we book a call, or here's my calendar, or can I grab 30 minutes? It was, so this is something we teach as well. It's like, when I send a message out to people, I usually say, been in startups and sales for 20 years. Let me know if you ever want to chat and swap notes, or if you ever want to brainstorm a few ideas, thought we might connect in the meantime. And as much as I might want to talk to that person, they might not want to talk to me. They might want to connect and just read more of my stuff. They have no idea who I am in a lot of cases. And I think my experience is like, I get messages all the time in email and messages like, this is what we do. Can we book 30 minutes? I'm like, dude, I don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
And no, 30 minutes is like half my day, the way that my day is constructed. So I like that you've sort of like given control to that person and not felt like you're trying to push.
Absolutely.
On them with like, can we book a call? When can we talk?
And I think that there is a delicate balance there, right? There's this idea that you want to be direct and be clear about what you want, but also these are strangers and I respect them very much enough to not say straight away, can I have 30 minutes? Like, I think I think what you said is really important, which is treat others the way you want to be treated, put yourself in other people's shoes. Like a lot of empathy, a little empathy goes a long way in the sales process and shouldn't be underestimated.
For sure. And so the other thing I wanted to ask about, which is, I guess, like a little bit of a side topic, but so obviously you're a woman and you're running this company, and so you're sending this message out. Your co-founder is Craig, right? Craig Kelly.
Yep.
And so he's male, and so I'm curious about, do you find that there's a difference in response rates with you being a woman, him being a man, like a male-female thing? And then additionally, do you find any specific challenges in the receptivity of like, okay, it's a woman co-founder, like really kind of thing? Because that's unfortunately the reality of our world. I'm just kind of curious. And that, like, I don't know if your space is particularly male dominated. Like I worked in mortgages for 15 years and it's just like a bunch of, 50-year-old white dudes in blue suits, right? Yep. A woman at a conference is like, oh, she must be the assistant, type of thing.
This is very much my
experience. I'm kind of curious if because I'd love to hear that point of view and how you feel like that might factor into the results that you're getting, or any sort of headwinds that you might hit.
Yeah, definitely. In lots of places in our company, it remains a very male and white male dominated space. I come from that in emergency management. That's the way it was. And then it's persisted. I think that we haven't done the research or had even anecdotal experience yet on the sales side if gender is making a huge difference, because we experience such a huge impact on our fundraising side. We're a venture-backed startup, and we did raise venture capital, and we continue to raise venture capital. And that experience was so intensely oriented around gender in a really unpleasant way that we've sort of changed the way we do business as co-founders. And what that's like sort of a vague way of saying. When we first started fundraising, we went out together, and the experience was very much that I was the assistant. I was the note taker. I was the marketing or sales oriented founder, and he was the CEO. And we would have this experience where we'd be sitting in a meeting with funders or investors or even potential partners, and all of the questions would be directed at him. And he's brilliant and amazing, but a very technical co-founder, software developer, and doesn't particularly enjoy those conversations. And we went together because we were co-founders, but the questions kept getting directed to him, and he'd be like, look at me sort of like grimace face and be like, Sarah. Not that he didn't have the answers, but that was not the division of labor. Like, I own the finance of the company. I have the strategy. I have the domain expert. I have the vision. If you want to know about which library we use, that's great. And you want to know our engineering pipeline, cool, and how we're going to do that. But like, I am the CEO, and the CEO is the fundraiser. And it was so hard and frustrating and made for such awkward meetings that I go on my own now. And I think that lesson has been, unfortunately, manifest itself that I am the public face and I engage in those conversations so that we avoid having those awkward conversations where it's like, nope, not the assistant, the CEO. Thanks, but nope, that's me you want to talk to. It's interesting, the one sales story I have on this is that we welcomed a customer to our office, which we share with another company for the first time. And we were moving down the chain of sales conversations, and they came to visit us. And I got the door, and it was so clear that they thought I was the assistant. The door locks and you have to let them in. And they sort of were telling me things about the sales process and excited to talk to Craig. And I was like, no, you're here to talk to me. It's me. I'm your person. So it's interesting. It's a funny and difficult world. And I think one of the other things that's interesting, and I think it's hard to know how to handle, and I think it's probably hard for men, is that there's sort of a lot of this comes across very subtle. It's not the sexism it's most people are nice people and they don't think they're doing it. And they don't think they're doing anything wrong, or they're not making anybody uncomfortable. It's just sort of the way things are. But that's hard because then also you don't know how to engage. And I'm still working on what do you say and how do you do it respectfully and how do you still have boundaries? And it's a very complex issue, and we're living in an interesting time where we're making progress, I think. I hope.
I mean, I think we are. I think of it generationally. My parents just came and visited for a couple of days last weekend, and I sort of look at their sort of worldview and my worldview, and it's very different. And I grew up having their worldview because I grew up in the East Coast and grew up Catholic in New Jersey, and like that's how things were. And there was a certain perspectives on life. Then I moved to California, and I brought those with me. And then over time, those have changed and adjusted. So, and I feel like with our son now, who's 7, like he's so far removed from the worldview I grew up with.
Yeah.
That I kind of feel like, okay, generationally, we're making progress here. The problem is in between. You don't know which people within the generation, which is the signal and which is the noise, sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think I am excited to see the change. And as I said, a data-driven person, like I'm excited to see the data. I want to see the numbers that we're making big changes. And there's some sad ones over the last year, which is last year was a downturn in VC funding of female-founded companies. Mm-hmm. And I was like, shucks, we've gone up several quarters, and then last year we slumped. So
yeah, got
to keep making progress.
And so bringing it back to sales, I mean, do you notice any difference? Like once you do, you talked about this pipeline where you've got 40 conversations, 10 demos, 5 opportunities, 2 sales. Like at any point in that pipeline, because you're still doing a lot of the selling yourself. Do you notice certain spots like in a sales conversation where the other side might not be treating you with the same level of respect simply because you are a woman? And how has that affected how you're managing your team and managing your process?
Yeah, I think one of the places where it becomes most visible is in discussing money. In the actual dollars negotiation, I feel like there can be a little bit of gender challenge, and that because I'm the only person who does that negotiation, or my colleague, my sales colleague is another woman. But when I share an office with other people, with lots of male salespeople, there's not as much justifying for the cost. It ends up being sort of just a numbers back and forth, where a demand for justification and sort of in a hard way. In my experience, again, this is a lot of qualitative personal experience, but I think that that's the hardest part. I think that perhaps in the United States and perhaps in this phase, we haven't totally worked out how we talk about money. Money's hard for lots of people to talk about. And then add on some gender stuff. I think money and gender is hard. And I think there's relationship dynamics that become hard. How you deal with money in your relationship becomes an issue. And sometimes you manifest those things in your work. So yeah, that's the part that's the hardest. I think we have pretty smooth, I haven't experienced a lot of gender challenges or on the sales conversation part and moving down the sales process, but getting to the dollars and cents sometimes becomes more difficult, I experience.
Okay. And so it's not necessarily difficult for you. It's just the other side is sort of pushing back more than you feel like they would normally do.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And then perhaps there's an idea that a better deal can be had. I'm not sure. I don't have I think on this. We'll have to do
I think
episode 2. We'll have some data.
Well, I think it's important is sort of like you're just observing, almost, an anthropological sense. Like, okay, this is, we might not have our data, but this is sort of intuitively what we feel like we're seeing.
Yeah.
And I think, like, to relate this back to people listening, like if you're leading a company, if you're a CEO and you've got, men and women on your team, male and female, it's, I think, important to be cognizant that this may be a thing, right? So
Absolutely.
You have an account executive who's a woman, and you feel like, man, like every time she's getting down to contract, there's like tons of like negotiation and back and forth. But Bill over here, he just kind of like breezes right through it. Why is that? Well, maybe it's not about her and her aptitude. Maybe it's about the people on the other side. Let's take a look at who's negotiating.
Yes.
On the other side. Now, it could be her. Like maybe she's doing. It's not to say that just because she's a woman, that's why. Maybe there is some skill and training that needs to be developed, but there also could be another variable here in the equation that's important to be aware of.
Yes.
And whether it's account executive work or SDR work, top of the funnel, or customer success, what's the attitude of a customer when they're dealing with a CSM that's a woman versus, account manager who's a male?
Yes.
Do they even think of it differently? Like, oh, the woman is the CS person and the man is the account manager.
That's what I was just going to say. I feel like that's a really common division these days that we feel like is a natural one, but I'm not sure it really is. And I think it's a strange one. But I love this idea too. What you said brings up for me this idea too of believing people and their intuition. I really appreciate that you did that for me, that you're like, no, if that's your experience, that's your experience. And I think it's really easy to say, oh, it's not because you're a woman. Oh, it's not because of your gender, when it might really be. And I think people have a lot of intuition about that. And giving people the benefit of the doubt, if it feels like the benefit of doubt to you, can be really powerful. And also believing people, especially believing women when they say they're experiencing something because of their gender, is really powerful and can really not just create great culture and generate great outcomes in the company, but also that's a power for change. Just believing people. I hadn't thought of it that way. I really appreciate your reflection. It's a powerful one.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's just like as you're leading a company, you're like, okay, we're trying to grow fast. We're trying to scale. We're trying to bring on all these clients. I don't have time to like figure out why these deals aren't working. Just like get it done. Like that's sort of like, that's the intuition. Like, look, just figure it out, get it done. I don't have time.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you need to look at that and say, okay, well, when these deals come through, I personally might have to step in and get involved and explain to the client or the prospect, like, okay, look, Jill is involved here. Jill is in charge. She's responsible for the negotiations. Or if you're handing a customer off from, pay, like now they're converted and you're introducing Mary, who's head of customer success, like maybe you have to go out of your way to build up Mary a little bit more. Not just say like, oh, Mary runs customer success, but look, this is what Mary's background is. This is why we hired her. This is the success that she's been able to help our other clients enjoy. So just so you know, she's the expert. Because if you come to me with questions about customer success, the answer I'm going to say is, let's go talk to Mary because that's why I hired her. She's the best person for the job.
Yeah.
And I think it's important especially if you're a male founder, to like take that time and just like ratchet it up if you have to, because you need to set the expectation early in that relationship. Because if you don't, then the customer is going to anchor to what their default is, even if the default is inadvertent.
Yes.
You said happens. It's sort of this programming that we have. So we have to be willing to take those steps and be willing to. And at the end of the day, you're going to create a huge loyal team member because Mary's not maybe getting that support from her old job.
Absolutely.
So it's something that I think about a lot because we have a lot of female founders in our group, in our coaching group. And I've heard, you didn't get into the details of the funding stuff. You alluded to some of the challenges. I've heard some shit.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, he did that. That kind of thing. It's just, it's still happening. And I wanted to take an opportunity to address it because I know we don't have as many women on the podcast as I would like. And here you are. And I know you have probably had some experience with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Those stories, they're real. They happen. And it's happened to me. I had a fundraiser who invited me up to his hotel room and I was like, what? No. Oh my God. And there's this moment too, which is a really interesting one. As a founder, it's interesting because, right, you don't have a boss, you don't really have HR, you don't have anybody to necessarily go to. You're out there and your company's success is depending on your success in these things like fundraising. And it was an interesting moment because I think lots of women beat themselves up for not saying the smartest, wittiest comeback thing in the moment. And I work really hard at talking to women founders and saying, like, that's not your responsibility. That's your job. You don't have to be that person. Somebody did something to you that was really inappropriate. You don't have to be cool. You don't have to be great under pressure in that moment. But I think asking women on podcasts to talk about their experience is really important. And I think it shares a story that, like, this is really common and these gross things still happen and we're still making progress. And I think it can feel really isolating. I think building a fast-paced, high-growing, sort of up into the right company can be really isolating. And I don't know, keep on keeping on to the women in your group.
Yeah, and
listening audience.
And I've also had the experience where a female founder said, like, they know it's not, like, they know it's that situation and like that guy is obviously something wrong with him.
Yeah.
But I've had them say, like, what did I do wrong that created the situation?
Yep.
It's like, well, you didn't do anything.
Nothing.
Like, let's not do victim. Like, don't victim blame yourself.
Yeah.
Like, it's that guy created the situation. You did nothing wrong. But I've talked with women and they're like, look, what could I have done differently? Is a question I get. And I'm like, you did everything you did. Like, it's not like you showed up like showing leg and like, hey, let's go up to your hotel. Like, it wasn't your idea. You didn't walk in there with these motives. That dude did. But you didn't do anything wrong. Yeah. So you responded the best you could in that situation. And there's no blame for you. And it's hard to try to, especially like I'm trying to explain this to a woman. I'm not a woman. Like, so who knows how effective that, like, it's going in one ear, not the other, who knows? But it's just, I hear it and I'm like, no, it's not you. And my wife deals with it too. She's an economist and a pilot. Oh. So it's like, talk about that and talk about an overlap of a Venn diagram there. It's the same thing. But we go flying for the weekend out to somewhere and we get to the airport and people look at me like, oh, how long you been flying? I'm like, 0 days. She flies,
like passenger. I'm the passenger.
Yeah, exactly.
Go to the pretty places. Yeah. So, I think this idea too of having allies is important and will create more equity. by having more conversations and putting people in more equitable roles, having diverser teams, having more diversity in teams. And, these systems sort of feed on each other, that experience, and people are more likely to hire people who are like them, which then give more of those people experience. And then it's sort of this continual cycle. And so sometimes stepping out of that cycle and saying like, so we have a lot of CSRs who are women, but all of our account managers are men. Like, what happened there? What's our system? Having a sort of reflection on your system and what you do and how you do it is a good way to start. Yeah.
Cool. I appreciate that sort of right-hand turn there, because it just felt like it was a good question to ask as you were getting into it. So to kind of move back to the main thread that we were talking about credibility, piquing interest, requesting to learn more. You talked about your strategy for that. And where we left off was looking at, like, how did you come to that 3-part message of credibility first, pique the interest, request to learn more?
Yeah.
Maybe a better version of that question would be like, what are some mistakes you made that you would share with people? Like, these are 3 things, definitely don't do that because we tried and it sucked.
So 1, trying to create traction statements when we didn't yet have any. So like, tell me more. We have pilots with 3 Fortune 1000 companies. Like, I don't know if that's the strongest message. Also, we were given, so I think that there's something there which we then shifted. We started with this sort of idea that we should have traction. We wanted to demonstrate traction. But what we pivoted to was external credibility. We used the NSF strength instead of we were early days and we didn't have a lot of customers. We didn't have anybody we could talk about. So like, that was that same idea of like, if you're trying for credibility, it doesn't have to be a customer. Doesn't use the thing that's in your backyard, rather than trying for some meh thing. Go for the strongest one, even if it's not perfect. Another one which we totally struck out with, which is, I think people see through and be careful with. There's a recommendation. I love venture capitalists. So all of you VCs out there, thank you for your support. But I think that one of your weaknesses is VCs are dazzled by big, meaningless numbers. The biggest number you can give them, even if it doesn't mean anything, they get excited about. And we were given advice in early days in our company to identify like the really big numbers we had and we could throw out there. How many people were covered by our application, or how many whatevers. This is not an example from my company, but I was walking downtown Denver last week and I saw a bus drive by and it was advertising a Christmas lights show, and it said 2 million pounds of sculpture. And I was like, who cares? 2 million pounds of sculpture. I don't even have a mental
model. Like, how much ice is that?
And is it ice? Is it granite? Is it like, what is unique about that? Like, but it just was a big number. And I think companies fall into that too, that it's like, we have, 20 billion looks at our website, or we have however many acres. I saw an ag tech company recently advertise the number of acres managed under their application, but it was really only 2 customers. And I was like, is that really impressive? So I think, don't be dazzled by the big meaningless number. Find something that means something to your customers and is a real number. So real credibility, real number. And we just did a lot of testing. I think also some real acceptance of not knowing and being cool with having some real duds. It's okay. If you get nothing back, I think sometimes people get really invested in their ideas of what the perfect message is. You craft a lot of messaging, you think you've got it, and then it fails and you feel really bad about that. For us, one of the ways that we've really countered that is by time boxing a lot of this work. So let's do an hour of brainstorming. We'll do an hour of crafting. We'll end this session with 3 messages, and then we'll test them for a week, right? Like super analytical process. Nobody's feelings are involved. None of us know if we have the right answer. We're just going to go. I think that's a good place to be, to not get too wrapped up. And also in these early days, a 90% solution that takes half the time is way better than, or even a 60% solution. Start there and then iterate, get better.
Yeah, the 80/20, I think, and I like the idea of time boxing, right? Especially people listening, right? If you're a founder, or even if you're a VP of sales at an early stage team or a growing team, you've got lots of stuff that you're juggling every day, so you don't have a ton of time. So just saying, look, I'm going to do my 20, and I've got 2 hours from 7 to 9 a.m. on Friday morning. Like for me, a lot of times I'll go to Phil's Coffee here locally, Friday morning, 7 to 9, I'll hop on LinkedIn, I'll do some messaging, and I'll send it out, and I'm like, okay, I got my 20 done.
Yep.
And sometimes I got to stretch a little longer to 7:30, and sometimes I'm done a little sooner. But what that does is, like, the idea of perfection is the enemy of done.
Yeah.
So, like you said, get it out. And for people listening, some really good data that I learned from the Unleash conference, which is hosted by Outreach.io. I was at their conference last year, and they ran some experiments. They obviously run lots of emails through their system, and what they found is that personalizing the first line of the email versus personalizing like the entire email, like if you're doing outbound email campaigns, what they found is there was no material difference in response rates in just personalizing the first line versus like trying to figure out, okay, later in the paragraph, I'm going to add this name, the company name, or I'm going to try to reference this personalization. They just said there's really no difference. If you personalize the first line, then check the box, you personalize it.
Yeah.
And so
that's great. What a good practical tip.
It was really practical because I myself am guilty of this, where I don't want to be a spammy dude. Like if I send a message to somebody, I want them to know, like, this is for them. We also know we need to get some volume. And same with our clients, right? We don't want them to just blast 1,000 emails out and hope that 2 people reply. Like, we want to do this the right way. But then you have just the reality of balancing, time with and effort with outcome. And so you're trying to figure out what's the right amount of personalization. Well, it turns out just personalize the first line, first 20%, whatever that comes to, in that outbound email, and you'll get pretty much the same response rate as if you personalize the whole thing. So you just save yourself a ton of time and reduce error rate, because now you don't have other little fields that you're supposed to try to personalize. I've done that.
Yes, me too. It's terrible. Short and sweet. Do it in the beginning. Give yourself less options to mess it up. The other thing I think is a really good place to invest in time, speaking of time boxing on the sales stuff, is that we experimented and got caught up in sort of unwritten, unpublished rules of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. We don't know for sure. Maybe it's published somewhere, but I don't know. But we find that we get turned off essentially with no notice. If you have about 200 to 250 is our sweet spot, and it varies a little. Like, all messages stop if you have 200 message requests or LinkedIn requests out with no response. So we had a week where we were going gangbusters, and then it was dead. We were like, what happened? Where did it go? We were doing great. And it was as if we hit some sort of limit and they turned it off. And so I think being aware sometimes that it's not you, and that the technology you're using is funneling you or reducing your capacity somehow, and being receptive to that, and then experimenting to pull it all back or do whatever it is. But being cognizant of those limits. So 250, I think, is the max you can have. So that then gives you a true capacity limitation, that you can only do so much, and then you have to move on to your next task. So send out that many. And I think we personally, our company is doing about 30 a day, and that's about where we live in a very successful place. That's because of our customers and our message. It'll depend on anybody else. And I have another thought based upon what you said, is that another thing that we work on really hard at Geospiza is automating or processizing, not a word, we're going to use it, automating or making a process of anything we can. So I encourage my team, anytime they do something 2 times or more, to figure out what the process is, and can we either find a system or a tool that does it faster, or is it something we can hire somebody for less to do? And you can build a team really well that way. And it's really important to be cognizant of, are you working on the most important thing that's going to drive your outcomes the best? And so for me, It's really important. It turns out it's a really good use of our time for me to take the first sales call and me to be a sales oriented CEO. It might not be for you. And so what that looks like in finding those right things.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that the 2 times is a good number. Like I do that internally. I used to sit and write all of the marketing emails, and I love to write. It's enormously time consuming. I've timed myself, no matter how hard I try, I can't get a good blog post done in less than 3 hours beginning to end.
Yeah.
I would love to have all that time. And so instead what we did is we trained Jocelyn, our executive assistant, to look at transcripts, previous blog posts, podcast episodes. And I said, look, you go pull stuff out, type it up, send me the draft, and then I can update it. And of course, it's not going to be as if, I would love to be 100% of my voice. But again, it's like the message and the value is more important than is it perfect.
Yeah.
And so it's great for scale. And frankly, it's great for her because she wants to learn how to do the marketing, not just like set meetings and do billing and contracts and all that stuff. So it's a way for me to elevate the entire team. And it's something she likes to do. So I think one of the ways we had a podcast interview with a guy named Brett Gilliland, and we talked about how do you gift ownership of a role to someone, because it's like the stuff that you might not even like to do, other people might love to do.
Yeah.
If you don't have the time to do it, gift it to them. Like, hey, I'm going to have you do this, teach them how to do it, show them what it looks like to be done right, and then have them then just manage to those expectations. And if you do that, it's going to be better for you as a leader anyway.
We use a similar sort of approach. Ours is we use a modified jobs to be done theory or philosophy.
Oh, nice.
And okay. Rather than having job descriptions or job functions by title, we talk about what the jobs that need to be done in the company are. And some of those naturally group together, but then there's sort of like odd ones, or there's ones that they're not the most important thing, we don't get there. And we reflect deeply when we hire or fire on what the jobs are that need to be done. Have they changed? Do we have new ones? And also give everybody on the team the opportunity to say, like, this is a job that I do that I hate and I would like to give back. Like to put it back on the spreadsheet is what it looks like. I'm doing a bad job at it. It makes me want to cry. Whatever it is, like, I just want to give this job back, even though it might be that that's a key part of your role. You might not be able to give it back, but at least we have the conversation of like, here is a job that needs to be done. I'm doing a crap job. I want to put it back. And then we can hire somebody to take that job and kick butt at it, like really do it.
Yeah.
I had an experience, which was early in the company. It was my job to do social media. I was supposed to do the tweeting. I was horrible at it. And I hated every minute of it. It stressed me out, made me uncomfortable. I didn't like it. I'm not funny in so many characters. And everybody thought I was fine. And until I was like, I'm giving this job back to the list. I'm giving it back and we need to hire somebody who can manage that or we're not going to do it. It was a really powerful experience. It seems like such a small thing, but it can be really important. So another tip, write all the jobs that need to be done. Don't assume that they come for title. And if somebody is really excited about writing, but they're also responsible for everything else and they get those things done, give them the writing job. They'll probably do the best job at it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like the other thing I think about is just the level of procrastination and time wasted. Like if a job is like, oh, I know I got to do this thing. It's on my job role. I really don't want to do it. And it doesn't get done. If you do it, it's half-assed and you wait 3 days and it could have been done 3 days ago. It's like, let's just get it off your plate and just look at your throughput of everything else would probably go up pretty remarkably.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have jobs like that right now. I'm about to go open up a spreadsheet. Well, this has been awesome. We covered a lot of ground. I mean, we obviously talked a lot about cats and birds and dogs, which is important.
Yes.
We talked about, this idea of metrics and having a number to start with, and then you can always ratchet up, ratchet down. Dug a lot into that, and then talked about this structure that you're using. We talked about being a woman entrepreneur and a CEO, and then some tips around how to run a company in a more effective way. So not bad for 59 minutes.
I like it.
Should do this more often.
So fun. Such a joy. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for asking great questions.
Well, thanks for coming on the show. I'm really glad to have the opportunity to spend this time with you. So if people want to get a hold of you, they want to learn more about your company, want to learn more about you, And is there any kind of shout outs that you want to make around any causes, public or private? We'd love to hand the talking stick over to you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. You brought up the TEDx talk. I had the joy and pleasure to give a talk in Denver at TEDx and talk about why we do such a bad job at disaster management, why people still die even though we have great data. So I have a dream, a fantasy of getting to 1 million views, like 35,000. So, almost there. So I would love it if people would watch my TEDx talk and share it if it connects with them. You can just Google my name, Sarah Tuneberg, which is on the episode information here, I'm sure. You can Google it and it comes up, or you can go to YouTube and watch it, or you can go to TED.com and search my name, and it comes up in 3 places. I would love that. It's powerful. It speaks to my sort of deep purpose in life, and I love to share that message. So please. Also, if your company or you as a person are interested in how we move into action on climate, not in a really meaningful data-driven way, please reach out. I'm Sarah at Geospiza.us, and you can reach me, and I would love to talk to you about what you're doing and how we might be able to help. Yeah, and I think to female founders out there, you're fighting the good fight, keep it up. And that's how we'll really drive change. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, for sure. 100%. We'll put links to your email address, your LinkedIn profile, your company, and the TEDx talk as well. Yeah. We'll put that all in the show notes. So once we get the show notes done, we'll send them to you. You can send it to your tribe. We'll send it out to our tribe. If we can move the needle and get you from 35,000 to 1 million,
it's a small delta. It's really small.
Well, you're way ahead of me.
Big dreams.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, I think I'm going to look at my TED. I did a TED talk. It's been a while now, a long time. I probably have like 12 views. 11 of them were mine, and the other one's my mom. So, that's not bad. 1,700 views. So,
Good.
Not bad. Yeah.
Also go and watch.
I have my sister hitting play, but yeah.
It turns out YouTube has an algorithm for that. They don't let you count more than one view of your own. So you have real people.
That's pretty cool.
Be happy. It's not all your mom.
Yeah. Cool. Well, this has been a hoot. I'm so glad to have you here on the show. If there's anything we can do to help you out, please give me a holler. And until we do it again, best of luck with Geospiza, and we'll do it again soon. Okay, Sarah?
Thanks. Have a great Thanksgiving.
All right, you too.
Bye.
Bye. All right, folks, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci. As always, with these podcast episodes, if you could just do 2 really simple, small things for me that would help us get this message out to as many people as possible. Number 1, please leave a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, whether it's on iTunes or now Apple Podcast or Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher. It's available lots of different places. If you would just throw a quick review into those platforms, those reviews are instrumental in helping those platforms suggest this podcast to other people just like you. I want to get the message out to as many people as we can, so we can have even more people like Sarah here on the show. Number 2, if you would, believe it or not, as much as those platforms have those algorithms and people do search and blah, 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 the best way to get the word out and find more subscribers and get more people listening to the podcast is through you. And that means word of mouth, your mouth. So if you would, tell a friend or 10 if this episode's been useful to you. If you can think of somebody in your world that could benefit from this episode or from the show in general, flick them a note and say, hey, check out this podcast, the Startup Selling Show. Check it out on Apple Podcasts. Give it a listen or 2. Listen to this episode. If you could tell a friend or 10, even 1 is a good start, but 10 would be even better. That would be awesome. We'd love to see the subscribers go up and the downloads go up and the listenership go up, because it means that we're bringing you good content that's going out and the word is getting spread. So that's it. This is Scott Sambucci signing off.